So look, thank you all for joining us here. I'd love for this to be a hard-hitting interview when I've got one of my customers here at the stage, but this is going to be more of a chat as we discuss, what are the issues that are impacting us and how we're trying to work and navigate these challenges together. So Damian, as Chief Development Officer, it must always be a busy time, so thank you for joining us, but maybe tell me a little bit more about Stanmore Resources for the people who've joined us here today.
No worries. Thanks, Brad, and thanks very much for the opportunity and really valuing the relationship between Stanmore and Ampol. Look, Stanmore is a company. We've got 3 mines in central Queensland. They're all metallurgical coal mines. They're all within a 50-kilometre radius of it, and we produce about 14 million tonnes of metallurgical coal. Importantly, though, for this conversation, those 3 operating mines are also part of the safeguard mechanism. So that means they're all safeguard facilities, and that means we have 3 of the largest emitting mines or facilities in Australia of the top 216. So something that we take very seriously, and it's really important to Stanmore as an organisation to get this right. I think ultimately it's important to understand that we're a fast follower, and ultimately we've got a really fast, nimble and agile culture, and we're a small team. Now, how small are we? We've got about 3 years ago, we only had 1 mine. We were producing 2 million tonne a year, market cap of $200 million. And about 3 years ago, we bought 2 other mines, and that's really enabled some great growth for us. But now we're worth just under 3 billion. We're in the ASX 200. And really that means there's a lot of expectations from our stakeholders, be it insurers, financiers, government and the likes, to really meet some expectations. And as a result of that, we've been on a journey, and we've actually started up a company by the name of Stanmore Green as well, which has been part of it. And that company is all about leveraging off our existing assets within the Stanmore portfolio, but also reducing the impact and investing in ways that we can reduce our impact overall. So yeah, that's probably a bit about Stanmore. You want to give us for the people that don't know about Ampol, a bit of a...
Well, the Ampol story is it's a long one, right? So we talk about going back to 1936 with William Walkley starting the company, it's the Australian motorist petrol company, to generate energy security and fuel security for Australia. I'm pretty proud of the progress over the years, including in the 1960s building the Lytton refinery, which continues to operate today. And thanks to some government support, its security is looking good into the future as well. But we see our role now just sitting in partnership with industry to what we call powering better journeys today and tomorrow. So quite simply, that means every day you need us to deliver safely, on time, on spec, so that you can run your operations, right? We have day-to-day essentials requirements. We can't stop, and we're going to help you with fuel economy and other things today. But how do we take that future challenge? So powering better journeys today and tomorrow. What does tomorrow look like? And we released a decarb strategy, as most ASX listed companies have, but we're really committed behind it and making some positive steps. So the most visible people will see is Ampol charging rolling out across Australia, making a real impact to provide that energy transition for light vehicles. Exploring hydrogen, it's challenged, it could take longer, but we're doing a lot of work exploring hydrogen. And of course, then on the renewable fuel side, really exciting developments coming that way, and we'll talk about them a little bit later on. And sort of talking about the progress on decarb, I know there's been great work done over at Stanmore so far. Do you want to just touch on a couple of the highlights or the background of that strategy?
Yeah, thanks, Brad. Really what happened is when our organisation changed, we to grow that much in a short period of time, we actually sat down about 12 months after we bought those assets and redefined our strategy. And we had 3 key imperatives, and one of them was around maturing our sustainability journey, and really about and one of the material matters associated with sustainability has been decarbonisation. And if the strategy is endorsed by the board takes it very seriously, and so what interests my boss fascinates the hell out of me. So then we've been working quite hard on this and looking for solutions, and I guess the board has a concern because there's not necessarily feasible and commercial solutions straight off the shelf, and so we've been working really hard on sort of developing our solution. And really, it's also driven by the short-term nature of the fact that the safeguard mechanism is here; it's upon us. There's liabilities associated with that for Stanmore. So we know we work in a hard-to-abate sector. We know that you've got to look at big and small initiatives, and so we really ultimately we dissected it down to 4 key areas. The first one is around diesel substitution, and something we've been working together on. But really, that's all about how do we find different equipment or alternative fuel sources. And then there's fugitive emissions, and that's where rather than through the mining process, if methane gets emitted, it's deemed to be fugitive emissions. And really, the way we've been looking at it is that methane is a resource, and we've got to find value or creative ways to manage it, which means we'll ultimately be reducing our emissions. There's scope 2 emissions, so we want to be reducing our emissions in scope 2, so it's the supply of electricity compared to what we're getting from the grid, because we are grid connected at the moment. And then last but not least, there's always the small initiatives, the little things that do make a difference. And I guess a good example of that is we have recently implemented one of the first electric buses in central Queensland through our partner Kinetic. And really, it was driven from the ground up, which is fantastic. It reduces about 20,000 litres of diesel a year, which, it's a step in the right direction, but it doesn't quite solve the problem of the 200 million litres of diesel that we are burning. So, it's a step, and it's great, and it was delivered by the teams on site. And even with our 21 buses, it doesn't take a genius to figure out that it's not going to solve our problem. So small things and big things are really important. I think, look, you've been supporting us for a while now on our decarbonisation roadmap. Do you want to talk a bit about a few of those initiatives?
Yeah, so look, I've been with Ampol for 18 years, which is a long time, and anybody sort of stretch of imagination. And not long after I started, we saw this need, even back in the early 2000s, around the heavy-duty mining industry is very different, requires different challenges for engines than what you would see in your normal passenger vehicles. So we started pioneering and formulating a specific additive and an additive makeup into our fuels back, early 2000s. And we've gone on multiple generations since then. And on some of your assets, we've been partnering and doing work and studies, but also doing studies in other areas, right? So you talk about when you're putting a fuel additive to a piece of equipment, there's naturally a lot of skepticism because I've seen hundreds of different things in the marketplace that are available. So how do we go about proving it is often the biggest part of the journey. So we've got full size sort of QSK engines, sort of in that 45 litre class. We've had sort of Cat 7 litre underground mining type sort of engines, and we've taken them off the field and put them into laboratories, controlled every environment. Temperature, fuel mix, all those sorts of things to just show that how the cleanup of these engines can drive fuel economy, right? And then we go and repeat it each customer at a time. I'd like to say that the industry said, hey, we now get it, it works, but every customer wants to test again. And but we're making rapid progress where, the larger percentage of the major customers we have now have made the switch onto the product to save fuel economy. So it's great that there's short-term commercial stuff that can sort of save a few dollars. Agree with you on the next big steps, look more commercially challenged, but how do we start stripping away some of those barriers, right? And when we were talking earlier, Damian, one of the things you talked about is that diesel substitution, right? And we crawl, walk, run is the way I think about it. We did a bit of a crawl exercise to get started up there recently. Do you want to talk about that a little bit?
Yeah, absolutely. We actually did a demonstration of renewable diesel R20 blend, so 20% renewable diesel. I think it was to our knowledge, it was the first time it was used in the Bowen Basin, and we used 60,000 litres of it at one of our mine sites, Portrell, on our haul trucks, and really, I guess at the end of the day, the results were essentially boring, right? As you said, it's been proven you're all over the technology, and there was no impact to power, no impact to fuel burn or anything like that. So what that really does though is it gives us confidence, and it helped us as an organisation take the next step, which we're working on, which is around feedstock and what we can do for renewable diesel. So what we're doing is we're actually about to trial some planting of Pongamia. Pongamia is a native plant to Australia, and I spoke earlier about leveraging off our existing assets. So we have 80,000 hectares in the central Queensland of land that's available to us, and so we're using some of that land to trial that. I think ultimately though, it's going to take time. Pongamia takes 5-6 years before that you get the seed and the nut to turn into renewable diesel. And I guess then you've got to think about, well, that 50 hectares will produce about maybe 100,000 litres a year. But again, it doesn't sort of get us towards that 200 million litres that we've got to substitute. And so I guess, it's a step, and that'll take 5-6 years, and another 5-6 years after that, if we go, yeah, that's successful, let's plant, 50,000 hectares of it. So there's some challenges. I know you guys have taken a different path in terms of feedstock, but it's not just about the technical solution. It's also about engagement and collaboration and government. Do you want to talk about it, what you guys are doing in that space?
Yeah, so firstly, really glad to hear that, of course, the demonstration was boring. People like to call it tests or trials. We talk about we're demonstrating, we know it works, but to make sure, every litre, every batch that's coming through into Australia is that we're putting it through our laboratory at Lytton Refinery, right? So we have this expertise that produces sort of 6 billion litres of fuels every year, is that we want to just test it because, we've got to be ambassadors for this transition and make sure that the quality coming in meets the expectations, because it could get a bad name really quickly. And we actually really believe in the quality of renewable diesel as a drop-in fuel. And we're actively in engagement with the government at the moment around sort of 2 projects that will help us, bring domestic manufacturing sort of to life in Queensland. So the first one would be around co-processing, which could give us up to 50 million, 60 million litres of production as early as sort of 2026, which is a fantastic start. And then the flagship project, BRF, Brisbane Renewable Fuels, is a bigger project. So it wouldn't, FIDs late next year, and we're working with some partners in IFM and GrainCorp around what does that look like. But it could be, greater than 500 million, maybe up to 1 billion litres, starting in 2029 if it met all the criteria for manufacture. But the government's a big part of that discussion, as are many of the major stakeholders, as to we get across those challenges to make both renewable diesel and SAF come to life in this country. I know you've had some discussions with government recently as well, and they're pretty important in helping us break the back of some of these challenges. You wanted to share that?
Yeah, absolutely. It's we worked pretty hard to sign the first LEAP agreement in Queensland, the state of Queensland. So LEAP stands for Low Emissions Intensity Partnership, and what that means is they're providing us and helping us with a grant for a gas to power plant at South Walker Creek mine. And it really, what it does, it's a fantastic example of how government can really incentivise the mining companies and assist where the sort of business case doesn't quite stack up, and you can then make significant change. So I think it's all about basically taking that methane gas that out of the coal seam, burning it for electricity. That helps us do 2 things: reduce our fugitive emissions, and compared to the grid, it also helps reduce our scope 2 emissions. So there's some real positives in that. I think that's one of the sort of positive sides of the engagement with the government, and I think the other side that we've still got to work with government on is really around the challenge under the NGA Acts and the safeguard mechanism around the reporting. We're going from method 1 to method 2 reporting, but then we've got to make sure that we've got clear and pragmatic and practical mechanisms for reducing those emissions which aren't there. And we're talking to them, and they are listening, and I think that's just sort of all about how industry and government has got to go on that journey together. So yeah, I think we will get there, and I think it's a time where we need to do this to make sure that Australia remains competitive in the global environment. I mean, ultimately, we send our product to Japan, Korea, Taiwan, other places around the world, and we've got to remain competitive. Our biggest competitors at South Walker Creek, for example, in Russia, and I'm sure our customers are quite keen to continue to see Australia supply them with PCI coal. So yeah, it's definitely an important part of the future.
Thanks, Damian. Now, it's been fascinating being here the last few days and listening to so many speakers. So I'm going to ask you to just now take off your Stanmore hat and think about what we've been listening to and sort of working through. And there's so many solutions out there. We have renewable diesel, we have hydrogen, we have electricity, we have fugitive emissions, basic efficiency projects, etc. Do you see, other than collaboration, do you see that there's a natural winner out there, or is it too early to call?
Yeah, I think from my perspective, that's a challenging question to look into the crystal ball. But yeah, I think there's going to be different solutions for different time horizons, and we're working with some of our partners for things that are going to happen over the next 10 years. But then there's also stuff that'll happen in 15 and 20. And I think ultimately we know that there's no substitute for metallurgical coal right now. So I think it's going to be really important that we just find ways to keep reducing our carbon footprint across all the technologies. As I said, we don't have the balance sheet to really go it alone. So it's all about partnering and having strong partnerships, and that'll help us achieve a really good outcome. So what about yourself? You got any thoughts?
I think it's all of the above. I think there's no silver bullet, right? If it was easy, I think it would be done by now. But I think the silver bullet, I think, is the collaboration. Right, and that's what I think you've seen here at the CAT Theatre, is if we're not getting together and working through the issues, working with government, it takes a village. It's the customer, it's the supplier, it's the end user. So I think the end users of some of your materials are going to have to come on this journey with a bit, because there will be a premium somewhere. But how do we actually move all that forward? And there will be a little bit of everything. Even the most aggressively, electric sort of pundits out there still see that there's some equipment that will be quite a long time before it switches across, and others are saying it's not electricity. So it'll be very interesting, I think, to watch the next 10 years, and we'll certainly be doing our part with renewable diesel to make sure that those going that pathway have access to the right quality products and at the right time. So look, the time is ticking down, and well rehearsed. We've come just about to the end. Is there anything you want to say, Damian, before we?
No, I think we've covered it all. It's been good. Thanks.
No worries. Thank you for joining us here, Damian, and thank you for your time in the audience.